I just want to welcome you all to the Friendswood Public Library and just say how honored we are to have been able to host these panels. But the one person who's really been key to putting these panels together, I want to acknowledge before we begin, and that he also was a speaker at our last, is that better? He was also a speaker at our last panel, and like I said, was key to putting these panels together, and that is Mr. Harold Benson. So please give Harold a round of applause. And now I just want to introduce our mayor, Mayor Mike Foreman, who's going to come up and introduce our panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me, Denny? All right, because I was going to say, if you can't hear me, you need to come up closer. It's not my problem, it is your problem. Well, I want to thank Matt Riley and the entire Friendswood Library, because how about a round of applause for these guys? They've been putting together these events. Yes, superb, Matt. Thank you so much. We never thought we would really be able to accommodate this many people, but look, you know, you get rid of the books and we got a pretty big room here. Well, I'll tell you a very quick story because I want to turn it over to these guys, but about last October, you know, we got 15 active astronauts living in Friendswood. Active astronaut means not like me and Jerry, you know, the old timers. Astronauts that are actually working at NASA, you know, getting ready for space flights. And one of them, Kate Rubens, came up to me last October and she said, "Hey Mike, is Friendswood going to celebrate the Apollo 50th anniversary?" And I said, "Kate, if you will chair the committee, I'll help you with that." And she said, "Okay, I'll do that. I'll chair a committee." So we had a meeting, you know, with Kate, and we were starting to pull people together. We were getting Harold involved and a couple others, and had our second meeting, and Kate came to the meeting and said, "Well, Mike, NASA is sending me to Moscow for a year, so I'm out." So this kind of fell into our laps, but you know, I think with the help of people like Harold and Sally Branson over there and Brett Banfield, they you know, really had some great ideas. My only contribution to the whole thing, I think, was that I said, "Hey, if we had some old timers that could come up and speak at the library, that would be fun." So we found Jerry and we found some other old...
Hey, I'm the old one.
Larry's the old one. But I threw that idea out and I said, you know, we got some people I know that lived in Friendswood 50 years ago, worked at the Space Center like Harold, and if we could get them to come up and speak, but I don't know if we have enough to, you know, to do 3 or 4 talks. And then we found out, oh, we got like 200 people that worked at NASA 50 years ago, still living here and willing to speak. So, you know, now we're having to turn them away and say, no, you know, we've got too many speakers. But anyway, I digress. I really want to just introduce my former boss at NASA, Jerry Ross, you know. Don't say anything, Jerry. Jerry, somebody at the parade said, "Oh, Mike, you invited some other astronauts to be in the parade." And I said, "Yeah, we got some other astronauts in our parade for the 4th of July. And they said, "Yeah, but, you know, you've done 5 spacewalks, so, you know, they don't have that." And I said, well, Jerry's done at least 10 that he can tell us about. So I said, Jerry Ross has done a few spacewalks, a few more than I have. And so Jerry is a really an expert in the spacesuit. Amy, his daughter, Amy Ross, is sitting right here, Dr. Amy Ross. She's a spacesuit expert at NASA, still working, and just finishing up designs on a new spacesuit, right? Yep. We're in PDR, preliminary design review, so that means we're getting close. I mean, 15 years ago when Jerry and I were there, we were talking about it, but we didn't get it this far. And then Larry Bell, of course, you know, another expert, suit expert. So I'll turn it over to you guys, and I'll sit back and I'll learn from what I never was taught at NASA, I'm sure.
When they start staying old, that bothers me. They're youngsters yet. But for those of you who don't know me, I was born in the dirty 30s in South Dakota in 1936. My dad was a farmer, and he said that's the only crop he raised that year. I don't know, probably true. And grew up, got educated, got my college degree, and went to look for a job at an aircraft company, and they were all laying off because the Korean War had just ended. So I got a job with the Corps of Engineers in Omaha, Nebraska. Went to work on propellant loading systems for Atlas missiles, for Atlas D and then Atlas F. We put in 9 Atlas Ds and 12 Atlas Fs. And I was doing pretty well at that, and then the government decided to go to solids, and propellant loading systems wasn't needed anymore. So I applied to Cleveland, NASA, and they sent it to Langley, and they called me and said that they would have me at Langley. And I asked Ted Hayes, the guy that called me, what do you do? He said, well, when he got done, I figured they did everything, light the match and the whole 9 yards. Truth of the matter was, it was the Life Sciences Directorate, which became eventually Crew Systems Division and the Medical Directorate. I was working for Dr. Stan White, as it would be. And they told me 2 things. One, my wife had gone back to South Dakota. Her mother had hurt. She said, I don't mind. I don't want to go overseas or Texas. You take a job anywhere else, that's fine. And so I said, okay, I'll take the job. And he said, oh, by the way, come January, we're moving to Houston, Texas. I thought, oh, man, how'd I get out of this? But I took it. Sounded good. Went home, and the first question she asked me was, did you take a job? I said, yes. She said, where? I said, Houston, Texas. She said, I told you not to take a job in Texas. And her mother said, shut up. You go anywhere your husband wants to go. And that was it. So I got here. Took 2 weeks of leave because I didn't want to go to Langley and then move to Houston. So I got here on January the 2nd of 1962, which was the first day NASA, or then was Manned Spacecraft Center, accepted people in Houston. They did have some other 23 people here, most of them relocation people, and 4 other engineers. And our badge numbers used to be when you arrived. Mine was 00024, so the 24th person in Houston. Shortly after I got here, John Glenn did his first manned space flight, and then after that, a lot of people started moving from Langley, including Harold, I think. But about then, they decided to build a 2-man Gemini, because the president had said we was going to the moon and back before the end of the decade, and we had to learn a few things, including docking and maneuvering in orbit, joining up with another stage, long-term life on orbit, and EVA was one of the actions that they wanted to do, because we'd have to do an EVA when we got to the moon. So I was assigned to the Gemini Environmental Control and Life Support Systems, and that's when I got started working on spacesuits. And I hadn't been here but a couple of months, and I was told by Dr. Stan White to go to Brooks Air Force Base and take high altitude indoctrination. And so I'm going to give you a little rundown on the background of suits. Wiley Post, who was an aviator in the 30s, wanted to get higher altitude, but he ran out of oxygen and it was cold. So he adopted a diver's suit and put a bladder that would hold warm air from the engine when the heat came across, and oxygen into the diver's helmet. And that was our first version of a flight suit, eventually be known as a pressure suit. And the next one, the Air Force, or the military in general, needed some kind of protection for the people bailing out of an airplane to high altitude, so they built a partial pressure or a counter pressure suit, which it had little rubber bladders running down the extremities. When exposed to low pressure, they would expand and tighten the fabric around, and basically a tourniquet on the body, and keep the blood from all the vessels blistering, basically having a big hickey all over your body, except under your armpits. You couldn't put much pressure. They pretty soon realized that with pressurized cabins, they were going to have to go to a full pressure suit, which was much more amenable to the human body, by applying a fixed pressure over the body and feeding an oxygen mask with oxygen. A person could survive a bailout from a high altitude until they got low enough for a parachute to deploy, and then open their visor and breathe off the atmosphere. This is a Navy Mark IV, and I showed that because it was exactly the suit that they used on the X-1 and eventually became the Mercury spacesuit. Had a pretty complicated entry system with zippers going around the body and up from the waist. And zippers are something that scared us to death in the spacesuit business, because if you're going to use them for a long period of time, which in of course EVA you're going to put stress on those zippers, they have been known to fail. If you've ever had one cocked halfway up and can't get it down, you know what I mean. And there's a 2-layer zipper, pressure seal, and then a load-carrying zipper. So that is the Mercury suit, which was an adaptation of the Mark IV Navy suit. And this is the Skylab suit, which is almost the same, although this is in an EVA configuration, and I left out the other picture in interest of time. And it had the same basic suit that was built by a different company. The other one was by Goodrich. This is by David Clark. Had a different entry. It was a zipper straight down the back and up through between the legs, so that you did a back entry into the suit and made it an easier entry. And that was the Gemini suit. Other than that, it was basically the same. Both Mercury and Apollo had escape towers in the case of a launch failure. Gemini did not. They had ejection seats. And that got to be a bit of a problem because ejecting at an angle to get high enough to open a parachute on the pad got to be a little bit of a problem with CG problems. And so that's why the harness on that suit. So when I got here, I was working the Gemini ECS system, as I mentioned, and I worked very closely with the space suits and the pressure system because Gemini, we did the oxygen and the hydrogen tanks for the fuel cell as well as for the crew compartment. And we didn't fly fuel cells right away, but by the time we flew Gemini 3, we did have a what you call a supercritical cryogenic oxygen tank. So getting ready for our first flight on Gemini 3 in March 1965, I was down at the Cape with the family, and we were renting a cabin. We'd be down there for several weeks because doing all the pre-flight checkouts and everything for the flight. And on that flight, Gemini 3, Houston would be the monitoring flight control center. The primary flight was out of the Cape Kennedy, actually Cape Canaveral. And so I was down there preparing for that and working nights, and all of a sudden, Alexei Leonov, a Russian, left the spacecraft on the 18th of March. We're launching on the 23rd. Any of you in that time frame knows we were in a space race. Russia had launched the Sputnik. We were behind in a constant catch-up mode. Information told us that they were going to the moon, and we were in a race to get there before they did. So that was kind of a setback. When they did an EVA, we did not have one planned for probably 6 months to a year. Earliest would be Gemini 6. This was Gemini 3. More than likely, it's going to be Gemini 8 before we got to a fixed EVA system. Anyway, I got in the car after, it was a 3-orbit flight, and Gus Grissom and John Young returned. We packed the car and headed home. I got home on a Sunday night. Monday morning early, I got a call to get to work. We got to figure out how to go to EVA on the next mission. Well, the next mission was in June. This is in March the 23rd, no, actually 26th when I got the phone call. And we went out and at that time, Harold McMahon was a PERT man, and he'd laid out a chart, and he was the one managing the system for later use. And he said, there's no way, we can't get there. And I said, well, I think we could go to a simple open loop system, which didn't have any complexities, just purge the suit with oxygen. The air or oxygen came into the suit in the helmet area, so it would wash out the CO2. And the liquid oxygen has a dew point of about 192 degrees Fahrenheit, so it'll be very dry. It'll soak up the perspiration, and as a result, the crew will stay fairly cool. Now, you won't want to do too much work. It's about 1,100 BTU is the best you're going to be able to do. 1,200 maybe. Sitting down, 760. In the ECS, we had a valve called a suit pressure control valve and demand regulator, and I knew about that because I'd been building that for over 2.5 years. I said, I think we can use that because it's got 3 modes of operation, and something you want when you're putting a crewman out into the void of space is redundancy. In case of a failure, you don't want to lose an astronaut because in all cases, when he's out there in a spacesuit and a life support system with tools, he's a spacecraft. Has all the needs of communications and biomedical data and limited waste management and drinking water. All of the things you need in a spacecraft basically is now outside the spacecraft. Gemini was planning to use an umbilical instead of a self-contained life support system, so that was already in the spacecraft. And we decided to do that. And I put together a schematic. They said, put together a presentation. We're going to Dr. Gilruth tomorrow and talk to him about it. So I did, and I was up talking in front of Dr. Gilruth. And I didn't know he was back there trying to stick a paper match in this thing and stick it open so he could say it was not safe. I didn't know that. Joe told me that later. And we got all done, and we said, we think we can get it done in 4 to 6 weeks. We got to have it at the Cape before June. Give us a chance. And he said, well, I don't think we ought to do that. That's risky. And he said, "You don't ever get out of a good airplane. Why would you get out of a good spacecraft?" And the astronaut spoke up, White, and he said, "Well, we're going to go to the moon. The president said he was going to the moon and back. We'll have to get out then." He said, "You didn't say anything about getting out." He said, "Get there and get back." So they convinced him that we really need to do that. That was one of the objectives of the Gemini spacecraft. He said, "Okay, but I want it done in secrecy. So if it fails, nobody will ever know about it. It'll be just an attempt." So we came up with a cover story called the Chamber Vent System, because there was 2 new chambers being built, Chamber A and Chamber B. And the hypothesis was if a crew was in there being tested and got into difficulty, we'd be able to go in and rescue them with this life support system. So we did go to work. There were 17 people on the list of those that knew Ed White was going to fly that system at the time. As it started developing, other people had to be brought in because Ed came over to work on it at nights. We'd work nights so that his name wasn't recognized right away. We had a person at McDonnell Douglas, 2 of them, that were on the list to get us hardware, because this had to be stolen off the Gemini spacecrafts that were in production, because that's the only ones we had. Air Research, who was building hardware, was never told what was going on. They were the ones building the suit system later. Joey Mann went and bought the umbilical directly from the manufacturer, and we went to work, and in less than 2.5 weeks, I brought a development unit over, laid it down, and told Mr. Dick Johnson, "Okay, it's ready to go to altitude and be checked out if you want to sign somebody." He said, oh no, if you designed it, you use it." I said, "Oh, wait a minute, not me." I said, "I can't get in a spacesuit." He said, "Well, let me tell you, we'll get you in one somehow." And I want to tell you, they let every lacing in it that was out. It was on the top of my head, and I was in there, and they took it to altitude, and I operated on the umbilical for about 10 minutes. They turned off the umbilical, and I had an emergency system I turned on. Went on that, and then they brought the chamber down, and the next night, Ed White did the same mission with that quality unit, or that's the development unit. And then we were proceeding with the qual unit, put that into testing, and at the end of March, which was, a little after the 1st of March, so less than 2 weeks when we started, we had hardware in production. After 4 weeks, we had the qual unit pretty well into test. We were building the flight units, and by the end of April, 1st of May, we were ready to tell somebody what we had. Went up and talked to Dr. Gilruth and gave him the status, and they called the Gulfstream, and it was about 7 or 8 of us flew to Washington. That included Chris Kraft and Dr. Gilruth, of course, and a few others, and pitched it to the headquarters people, George Miller. And they said, "Well, we'll have to go brief the administrator." So they'd left. I didn't go over there. Came back, and about 3 days later, they announced it that we were going to do EVA on the next mission, and that was a big deal because this whole thing was a one-time shot trying to show we were not that far behind the Russians. Really the only objective, because the real EVA hardware that had a cooling system and more capability was coming down the road later. Anyway, this was Ed White as he stepped out, and we had built a little maneuvering gun called the zip gun. If you see that hose that comes out of that little chest pack there called the vent control module, because again it was a chamber system, right? Went up and went into the feed port in front of the helmet where they normally injected water or food to eat when they were in a helmet, pressurized. And again, Gemini suit was a backup system. These were all emergency devices, and we had to make it into something you could go EVA with. And the reason I brought up this picture here, as we were getting ready to prepare the suit for launch at the Cape, my suit engineer by the name of Elton Tucker said, "You know, there's nothing on the suit that says U.S. of America. We have a NASA emblem." And he said the Russians had CCCP on their helmet for the Soviet Socialist Republic. And I said, "You're right. We need to do something." So we went downtown to the Cape to a TGY store, and we bought 10 of these little flags on the stick. Honest to God. Took them back and put them in a vacuum chamber and off-gassed them, and had the suit techs sew them on the arm of the suit. And I wrote a Type A TPS, and the quality guy signed it, and Elton signed it, and I signed it, and we put it on and flew it. And you can see it on his shoulder there in that picture. You see the flag. Every spacesuit since then's had that flag on it, and it should have had it all along. But TG&Y never knew their flag flew on the spacesuit, but it did. And so, in the next slide, there's that little vent control module I was telling you. And that's, if you read it close, if you get up close, it says vent control module. The one in Smithsonian says the same thing. That's the flight one. And that little tube up there in the top is the one that you saw in the earlier picture going into his mouthpiece, and that's the emergency oxygen. There's a little bottle down there at the top, that little pressure bottle, high pressure oxygen called an artiform. Gemini's ejection seats use those for bailout. But when they tried to test the sled, it took off at weird angles, and they decided they had to get the CG down lower in the seat, so they went to a milled out bottle, and these were available, so I had excess bottles. Put two of them on that zip gun, one in here, we plumbed it up. This valve I talked about is sitting right down there in the lower left corner. It was fitted with a suit fitting, so it'd go right into the suit connector. And that's the one we flew. That was a development umbilical made with a hose and some cloth. The real one that they flew was gold covered for thermal reasons. After that whole mission was over, there was a big deal. I mean, actually, NBC built a studio on top of the hotel across the street. The press came in from all over, and they were interviewing, did their nightly news from that building on top of the building over there in the hotel. And used to be two papers in town, the Houston Post and the Houston Chronicle. And the Post had a full page, two-page spread really, on the Sunday paper, and it says, "Daddy's home." Picture of me and my family, because I had slept on my desk a whole lot of nights. In 7 weeks from the day we got the go-ahead, the flight hardware was installed in the spacecraft at the Cape ready to launch. When you think about it, that's phenomenal timing. And everybody came to the shops, work. Remember one night I got home about midnight, got to bed, and at 2:30 the phone rang, said, "Your hardware is ready." And I called one of my guys, Roger Tanner, who used to live here in town. He said, "I'm tired," hung up the phone. I got up and said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going back to work." "Well, if he can't get up, why are you getting up?" I said, "I gotta go, it's my hardware." So I did, and that's the way we worked for those, at least 5 of those 7 weeks. So I was back down at the Cape, and that's when I had issue with the flag. Coming out of the Gemini flights, we learned a lot of things. We had to slow down our timing planning because it took longer in space to do any task. Restraints had to be modified to be a lot more secure because just floating around you can't do any productive work. The cooling system, and we already knew this, had to be upped quite significantly for doing any activity because he mostly floated around out there and obviously had to get hot because that's how we cooled him, was by sweat. So it was an attempt to get caught up with the Russians, and that's all it was. And that was the first EVA for the free world. So little did I know at the time that that effort was going to be something that significant. So we incorporated those things in the Apollo suit, and again, it's basically an escape suit modified for UVA. It's got cover layers. That's the one they march out of the trailer with and get in. It did have 4 gas connectors. The Mercury only had, and Gemini only had 2, one for an inlet and an outlet. We had to put what they call a T connector on there because we wanted to be hooked to the environmental control system in the spacecraft and to the EVA hardware, and then just go off with the one in the cabin at the last minute. So we modified the Apollo suit to have all 4 so you could have the backpack hooked onto it. The Apollo also went to a totally separate life support system. Necessary because they're going to be walking away from the spacecraft. It did have a lot more capability, obviously. There's a large oxygen bottle in there. And I don't know how many of you know this, but in the vacuum, water boils at about 42 degrees. So the way we cool astronauts in the later Gemini and in Apollo is by boiling water. This one actually sublimates, which goes straight to a vapor phase. Running water or coolant through the heat exchanger and run the water over to cool the crew. So we had a lot more capability to exert yourself more and have a way to cool them. Oxygen to maintain the CO2 control, but it also had a lithium hydroxide canister to absorb the CO2 where we were washing it out with open loop. And the suit was given a lot more mobility because he's going to have to walk in an ejection seat or even floating around in zero-G in Ed White's case. You didn't need all that mobility in the leg. In fact, you didn't have much, to be honest with you. And in Gemini, we did some other, actually a total of 9 EVAs, but they all used a semi-open loop system, was better than the one we used on Gemini 4. But anyway, you can't see a lot there, but there were convolutes in there and adjustment straps, and gave it kind of like a culvert in the road, you know, the corrugations. You take a piece of straight cloth and pressurize it, it's a pipe, you can't bend it. If you put the convolutes in it, it becomes flexible, and that's what's in those leg sections so they can bend their knees and walk. And to cool them, we used a liquid cooling garment, which has got little tubes running all over it, and you'll see one laying right here. But the coolant would run through to keep the body cool, and sometimes they actually kept turning it up. It was getting too cold on the lunar surface if they were riding the buggy or something where they weren't extraneous. And it had a 4-hour capability. The one I did on Gemini 4 was 20 minutes, 10-minute emergency. This had about a 45-minute emergency and actually 4 hours. And later in Apollo, it went up to 7 and 8 hours, which is about what Jerry had in his when he went. The boot was a boot, that's what it was. It was put over the pressure bladder for walking on the moon. And a couple of points of interest, you see that dark gray cloth there? That actually went up under the leg cover to the knee, and it was chrome LR thread woven into a stainless steel cloth. And that was on there to protect the suit from being jabbed with a sharp rock or some sharp object punching a hole. It formed a shield, and yet it was flexible like cloth, made out of stainless steel. Actually thread woven in the cloth. In the bottom of that boot, there's a piece of leather that's actually shark skin. That one was. Shark skin stays flexible at extremely cold or warm temperatures. And something you wouldn't know, but sharks swim pretty cold water. And they didn't want, regular leather would crack when it was 200 below zero or 120. And on the moon, you step from a shadow to the sun, you can get a change in temperatures of a couple hundred degrees. So then it was covered with that rubber-like material and a tread that you were used to seeing pictures of. And that's them on the moon. The 2 crewmen on Apollo 11, which is the one we're celebrating, only spent 2.5 hours on the lunar surface. But in that 2.5 hours, they did quite a bit of work. They recovered 22 kilograms of lunar material, which 50 of which were rocks. They core samples, loose materials, put up the American flag, did other scientific experiment deployments. Got back in, and within 7 hours, we're back getting ready to dock to the command module. So we made major strides, and yet there was still the problem that these suits are a safety device that you're using for EVA, and that's not the right thing to do. So in the future, we wanted to go for something that was specialized strictly for EVA. In other words, an EVA system, not a suit plus a bunch of overwraps. And by the way, the Gemini suit, to make it suitable for the outside, I jumped that slide, it was up 22 layers of fabric, starting with a pressure bladder, a restraint layer, then we had multiple layers of mylar and felt to be a micrometeoroid barrier for micrometeoroid particles that didn't penetrate the suit, and another cover layer, a total of which were 22 layers of cloth. It gets kind of bulky. We didn't want any zippers, hoses, or external hardware because they're all failure points, and they snag on things, and it's not a real system. You wanted the hood on your car and put the engine in it, that's the life support system. We wanted to minimize leaks with volume that are hard structures if possible, and make it size adjustable. Improve the durability and in-flight servicing, which has paid off, by the way, when you get to the space station. So we went and developed an all-hard suit except for the joints, and they were armadillo joints. We built several versions of this. It was what's called the RX-4, built by Litton Industries. It had a fiberglass and aluminum upper structure, upper torso, a lower torso, and actually had a bearing joint at the waist, so you could snap it together and then rotate your shoulders, giving flexibility, and then use of bearings at the hips and shoulders and other places to get rotation plus flexible joints. Well, that was a little bit bulky, but it gave us some good ideas. So when we moved towards the shuttle program, this being the shuttle suit, you'll see the backpack is in fact integrated into the back of that hard torso. does have a hard upper torso and a hard lower torso, a minimum number of sizes. And then it's got upper arm segments, lower arm segments, gloves, and you can put the suit together literally in pieces. All our other suits up to land have been custom built, one for each astronaut. Pattern, little seamstresses sewing them together to fit. Very expensive and very time consuming. And when you get to somewhere like space station, you need to leave this hardware on orbit and service it like you would any other system. And this allowed you to do that. And this then became the shuttle suit, which Jerry is very familiar with and used, and was frankly quite successful. The thing you see on the front is the control panel, the control module. And of course it had a radio for signals and no wires and a cable, no hoses. And in fact, when coupled with a maneuvering unit, becomes a whole self-sustained spacecraft. That pretty well brings me to my point, and I think I'd turn it over to Jerry to talk about how he used this suit.
Thanks, Larry. Well, you're going to find out that we have not rehearsed this. We didn't know what each of us was going to say, so you're probably going to hear some things again, which is probably just fine. But the spacesuit that Larry ended up with is the spacesuit that we used on the space station and the space shuttle. It was called the Extra-vehicular Mobility Unit, or we call it the EMU. It had a hard upper torso, it was fiberglass and or aluminum, and then the lower torso assembly, LTA, was made up of fabrics, as Amy showed you, multiple different layers with the bladder that was the pressure retaining material that's similar to the green material on this glove here. So let me just kind of review what I think I'll talk about. And by the way, we're going to hold questions until after all three of us have spoken, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So first of all, Larry touched on it somewhat, but why do you need a spacesuit? Well, if you go outside into the vacuum of space, you're not going to live very long because your blood's going to boil, you're not going to have any oxygen to breathe because it's a vacuum out there. It's a pure vacuum out there. And also, as Larry was talking about, the temperature extremes wouldn't be very comfortable either. In the space shuttle and the space station at the altitudes we fly at, if you're in direct sunlight, it's plus 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And if it's nighttime or if you're in shadow, it's minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So Amy, when she's designing spacesuits, has her hands full with all the different things that she has to address. So what does a spacesuit provide you? Of course, Larry's already talked about a lot of that, but first of all, and very importantly, it provides you with the air that you're going to breathe. It also contains the pressure around the body so that you can survive. He talked about the temperature control so that you can be somewhat comfortable inside the suit. The CO2 removal, remember you're exhaling into a closed environment here. And if you did that into a paper bag or something like that, after a while the CO2 level is going to build up and you're not going to like what it does to your body. You'll pass out or get faint or something like that. So we had to remove that. Additionally, you're working hard, so you're building up a lot of sweat. And that humidity level is going to build up very quickly, just like it does here in Houston all the time. And so we have to control that humidity level through some systems that we built into the backpack. Obviously, we want to be able to talk to our fellow spacewalker out there, so you need a communication system that allows us also to talk to the people inside the space shuttle or space station, as well as being relayed down to the ground so they can keep track of what's going on. And then, of course, you want a spacesuit that allows you to do some useful work out there. Otherwise, there was no reason to go out there in the first place. So one of the things that Amy started working on very early in her NASA career was the glove design, which is by far probably the most challenging aspect of a spacesuit. You know, the hand is so critical to what we do outside. You need the tactility and the dexterity. And, you know, every time you open and close your hand to do some work outside, it's kind of like squeezing a relatively stiff rubber ball. So if you can imagine doing that for 6 or 7 hours when you're on a spacewalk, you can imagine how fatigued that hand will get. Remember, when we talk about spacewalks, it's really not a spacewalk. It's a space crawl. Your feet aren't of a whole lot of good use other than, can you grab the boot? Other than for clipping the boot into what we call foot restraints. And you see this aluminum addition to the heel of the boot. We use that by taking our foot and rotating it inboard and pushing it down and then rotating it back out, and it goes into kind of like a stirrup or a clamp. And that holds our feet in position so that we have now both of our hands free to do some useful work. Otherwise, you'd be flailing around and trying to spend a lot of your energy just to keep yourself at the workstation and to react to the forces that you're creating as you turn a wrench or whatever else you're doing. I will talk a little bit more about the parts of the suit as we go through my slides. Then I thought it would be interesting for you to know a little bit about where and how do we do our training to use the spacesuit, and talk a little bit about spacewalking. What is it like to be outside on a spacewalk? And then briefly I'll talk about a couple of other spacesuits that I've worn, and we'll turn it over to Amy, and then after that we'll do some questions. So this is me on orbit. And first thing you do when you're getting ready to go on a spacewalk is to get up and have a good breakfast and then make a visit to the bathroom, because it's going to be a long time before you see that again. Normally it takes you anywhere from 2 to 4 hours or so to go outside on a spacewalk. That's because you have to flush the nitrogen that's in your body system out so that you don't get a decompression sickness or the bends when you go outside on a spacewalk. It's opposite to a diver who goes down and then comes back up slowly. We have to get all the nitrogen out to start with. So that's part of it, and then you go out and do a 6 or 7 hour spacewalk, and then you come back, and it probably takes at least another hour or so to get back into the airlock and repressurize and get out of the spacesuit. So it's a very, very long day. So this is Jim Newman and myself. This is on my 6th flight where we started the assembly of the International Space Station. And what you see are some basically long underwear here. So underneath the underwear you can't see is a diaper or some type of urine collection device. And Amy's got one here that she'll show you in a little bit. But basically over that then we would put some very lightweight long johns. And you can also see on my, thank you Amy, what's behind door 2. And you can also see on my left wrist here, I've got a dark colored fabric glove, and I've cut the fingertips off the glove. The glove is called a comfort glove, and it really is to aid you getting into and out of the rubber bladder of the glove. And also it has a bunch of folds that would kind of pinch your skin, so that's kind of helping you to not get that condition on your skin. And then above it you can see what looks like a cut-off sock, and that's what it is, the top of a sock. It's a wristlet that we use that helps to reduce the amount of wear and tear that our wrist is getting on the inside of the metal ring where the glove attaches to the suit. So that's some of the things that we put on as we're getting ready to go out on a spacewalk. And the next thing is the thing we already talked about, the liquid-cooled vent garment. You can see on my shoulders I've got some pads that helps to spread the load and to help the shoulders from not getting too much wear and tear on them. We've had quite a few astronauts over the years who have had quite a bit of shoulder damage and have had surgery on their shoulders. So you try to do whatever you can to protect yourself. The liquid-cooled vent garment has a, as you can see, there's all these little Tygon plastic tubing that's sewn into the suit. And it's an elastic material so that it holds tightly against your skin so that you get that good heat transfer from your body heat temperature to the cooler water that's being circulated through the hose or through the tubing. And that is all routed to a connector that you can kind of see here that is connected to the top half of the suit when you get into it to complete the circuitry. You can see one of the air tubes up here on the goldish colored tube that is again some of the air circulation system inside the suit. Down below you can see the pants, the lower torso assembly, and the black ring here is the thing that connects your pants to the top half of your spacesuit. And you can see the yellowish material inside, that is the pressure bladder. That's what keeps the air inside the suit so that you don't have it leak out and cause you problems. Guys, you would really be cool in zero gravity because you put both of your legs into the pants at the same time. Because you can't not do that, otherwise you will never get into it. So that's pretty cool to know about. So here we are now. This is Woody Spring and myself. This is my first flight. And we are now, this is a practice run on the ground, but we are now at the point where we've got our liquid cooled vent garment on. You can see the white dot there, that's a telemetry for an EKG. The black hose connector that I talked about earlier that connects up the fluid and air circulation systems. The lower torso assemblies with the boots, and the back side of the boots we've already talked about has got those clips for putting into the foot restraint. And then inside the airlock you can see the top halves of our suits hanging on the wall. And we're going to go in there and crawl up into the top half, and it's a real wiggle. If you're claustrophobic, don't try it. I could never get a full breath, full chest of air whenever I was in the suit because it was just not big enough for me to do that. So, okay, I think that's everything there. Here we now are in the airlock. Brian O'Connor, our IV support crew member, the guy that's dressing us and going through the checklist step by step, meticulous, to make sure that we didn't forget anything. So you can see now we're into the upper half of our suits. This is where the gloves are going to be attached to us later on, and the helmet will go over our heads, and that will complete what we wear for a complete suit. You can see again one of the air ducts over here, the liquid cooled vent garment here. And you can also see now the umbilicals. There's one there and one here. Those are what were tied to the space shuttle's supply systems, our cooling water while we're still inside the space vehicle and space shuttle. It also has communication systems. It also is how we resupply our oxygen tanks and our water tanks. The water tanks are what we use to provide the water that helps cool the spacesuit while we're outside. So those are our communication systems, that we recharge the batteries in the spacesuit through those, all kinds of things there. You see a couple of hooks here on a tether. Those are our waist tethers. We use those as our safety connection to the vehicle so that we don't go floating off and get lost in space. And I guess that's about it. Okay, here's the other thing I wanted to show you. This is a foot restraint. You can see these things right here, these kind of like stirrups. That's upside down stirrups, if you will. That's where you put your toes underneath. And then you take the heel and you put it between these two yellow devices here, put the heel down flat, and then rotate it outboard, and that clips your heel, the booted heel, into the foot restraint. And those were very, very critical to us being able to do critical assembly work on the International Space Station. And part of our design of the space station was deciding where to have foot restraint capabilities to assist us in all the assembly activities. This is what I told you about earlier, that Amy's first activities when she came to NASA was helping to do the final design and certification work on the gloves. I ended up being the guinea pig. I wore about 3 or 4 different pairs of gloves as we developed them. On my very first flight, I had a lot of numbness in fingers, and some of that lasted for a month or 2 after my flight. And so we tried to get better and better with our designs of the gloves, and the series of gloves we got to, and I wore for the first time on assembly flight of the station, was the pair of gloves that we are still using today, and they are a marked improvement from where we started. And thank goodness that Amy and her team were able to come up with a much improved glove. But you can see again, if you can imagine putting that on and trying to do any useful work, it's not the easiest thing to do. Those are big, stiff fingers. I forgot to tell you, the spacesuit is pressurized to 4.3 pounds per square inch. And so if you tried pressurizing a balloon at a birthday party to that level, you might pop the balloon. So it makes everything very stiff. So again, trying to work in a glove that's pressurized to that pressure makes it pretty stiff and difficult to work in, especially when there's multiple layers of insulation and padding and everything else. And this is a rubberized material that is used to provide some non-slip gripping capabilities. And okay, I guess that's about it on that. So here we are on orbit on the International Space Station. This is Steve Smith. This is on my last flight. That's me in the suit. So some other things to look at here are Larry talked about the DCM, or the display and control module, which is on the forward part of the chest here. That is a little computer in there. It's also is monitoring all of our systems and letting us know if there's any problems. It will give us an alert tone in our headset so that we can look down at the displays and see what's going on. You can see I have a cuff checklist here on my arm. That checklist has some normal procedures, but most of them are emergency procedures. what to do if you have some type of a malfunction procedure on the suit. And also on that cuff checklist are the detailed procedures we would need to do to fix a lot of the malfunctions that we identified on the space shuttle's payload bay doors that may preclude us from safely closing those doors and being able to come home safely. So those are the kinds of things that we worked the details on and worked on the hardware and the procedures quite a bit. On the top of the helmet is another device here that is a package that has a couple of lights, one here and one over here. And up here on the top of the lights is a little TV camera. So in this version we had 2 TV cameras out there, and the back part here is where the batteries were, and then we had 2 lights on each side, and there's a button up here that you could depress to get one light, the other light, or both lights, or turn them all off. You can see on the visor here that there's also, if you can see it, that's not easy, but that's a gold visor, and that's like your sunglasses. So when you're outside, the sun, it can be extremely bright because you don't have any atmosphere or anything else inhibiting the sunshine. We also have on the top of the display and control module a purge valve that you can open up for certain types of emergencies, but you also use that as part of your getting ready to go outside, where you open that up and you purge out the nitrogen that's inside the suit, so that you're breathing a pure 100% oxygen to scrub out that nitrogen that's in your body tissue. There's also another smaller purge valve over here that under certain emergency conditions outside, you would open up that valve and it would give you emergency cooling and flushing of carbon dioxide if those systems were to fail. Also, this DCM here is interesting because all of the words on it are written backwards, because you can't see what's written on the front of it. So you have a mirror that is on your wrist of your glove, and you look at the mirror and you position it so that you can read what's on the front of the DCM. And of course, when you read something in a mirror, it reverses all the images, so it looks correct now. Whoever thought of that? Pretty cool. Okay, so here we are getting ready to go outside, and you can see Steve Smith is double checking to make sure that our locks on our gloves are complete and satisfactory so that the gloves won't pop off while we're outside, which would be a bad end of the day. And let's see what's next. Okay, so what do we do once we get into these suits? You have to do a lot of training. You have to know how to work in the suit, and you have to do a lot of development of the hardware and procedures that you're going to be working on, so that you make sure that you can physically do the tasks that you're being asked to do. So this is the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory that's out on the Ellington Field property, and I worked for 10 years to get this facility put into place so that we would have the capability to train to build the International Space Station. And we got it in place just in the nick of time to allow us to do the training and development that we needed to do for the International Space Station. Our first water tank that I worked in here was about 25 feet deep, and it was about maybe 70 feet long and about 30 feet wide, maybe not even quite that. This one is 102 feet wide, 202 feet long, 40 feet deep, and has 6.2 million gallons of water in it. And we maintain the temperature at around, I think, what, 85, Amy?
Yeah, cold.
It still feels cold when you get into it, but it's a lot better than it could be. But even with the size of that, you still cannot put the entire space station mock-up in there at one time. But it still is exactly what we needed to train for the station. So this is what you look like when you're getting ready to go train. You've got your full suit on now, the helmet and your backpack, a simulated backpack. You got all your tethers and everything else that you're going to be using. The thing I forgot to point out earlier, there's on the front of the upper part of the suit, there are a couple of holes that you can plug a tools carrier into. And then you can rotate that thing out to get to your tools and then rotate it back so that you can do the work. You don't want that tool carrier to be very standoffish, in other words, stick out very far, because then you can't reach far enough beyond the tools that you have there to do any work. So everything is always a trade in trying to make sure that everything is going to work to the best advantage. The other thing I told you about is, remember, the spacesuit is pressurized to 4.3 pounds per square inch when you're in space. On the water, we normally do it at 3.5 pounds per square inch, 4 pounds maybe now. But again, that's going to make the spacesuit be a balloon, and it would just float on the surface. So if you look carefully here, you can see some weight bags that are strapped around our legs. There can also be some up in the chest area, and then on the backpack, there's multiple areas where you can put additional lead weights in there. And if you do that precisely enough, once you get into the water, you can get to a condition where you're pretty much 0 G. You're not going to sink, you're not going to float, and when the gyro puts you into various different attitudes, or you put yourself into different attitudes, you'll stay in that attitude and you won't pop heads up or go heads down or something like that. So this is me in a water tank, and I'm checking out my way out to make sure that everything's happy. And I was one of the guys that always liked to do as much time heads down as I could. And all the divers told us we weren't supposed to, and medical doctors told us we weren't supposed to. And I said, this is the only place I can do this, so I'm going to do it. Thank you very much. But again, that's part of the trust of the International Space Station that we worked on, so it gives you an idea of the scale. And this is the training hardware that we had for the very first space station assembly flight, which I was on. This is the US Node 1 here, and the pressurized mating adapter, PMAs 1 and 2 that were on each end of that. And then this is just a very small portion of the front end of the Russian hardware that we were mating up with, called the FGB, or the Functional Cargo Block. And we had to go out there and do quite a bit of different work and connecting up electric lines and things like that. And this is the hydraulic version of the robotic arm that we had on the space shuttle that we also had in the water to help us to incorporate that into all the activities that we were doing outside. It's interesting to note that we also had quite a few divers down there in the water with us, and all of us would always comment when we got outside on our first spacewalk that it sure was nice to not have the view being blocked by all those divers and their bubbles. We also did training in the Vomit Comet, as it was affectionately known. It was a Boeing 707 type of airplane, a KC-135 for you Air Force guys. And we would fly parabolic flights in that to try to simulate zero gravity for about 20 to 30 seconds per parabola. And we would do that by climbing up at a fairly steep angle at a fairly high engine rate, setting. And then as we got closer to the top, we would start to push over and come back down. And as we started to come back down, they would throttle back the engines. But as we went over the hump or over the top, inside, if they did a great job of flying the airplane, we could get around 20 to maybe even 30 seconds of zero G time. So in the water tank, when we were doing our training, the viscosity of the water was masking what we were going to see in pure zero gravity. But by doing training and work in a zero G airplane, we also got to understand how the suit was going to respond, how we were going to respond to inputs. And by putting those two together, then we had a pretty good feeling before we went out on our first spacewalk of what was real and how we were going to have to react to everything that was going on. So here I am out on my first spacewalk. This is me in the red stripes here. And we were doing what the press called Tinker Toys in space. We were looking at different ways of assembling structures, and but what I want to show you here is not that. You can see Woody Spring has got his feet in a foot restraint here, so he has both of his hands free to do work. I likewise was in a foot restraint on the backside. But you can see these yellow bars positioned strategically around. Those were handrails, and they were specifically there to allow us to do the translations that we needed to do from place to place by using those handrails to put our gloved hands on to maneuver around. And likewise, we put foot restraints where they were going to be most advantageous to keep us busy with what we were doing. A great view. This is on my sixth flight. This is the start of the assembly of the International Space Station. And I think the main thing I wanted to point out to you here is my tools here, but also you can see right in here and right down here and over on this side something else that we built, which was a SAFER, a self-aided rescue device. I was worried about crew members becoming detached and floating away from the space shuttle or the space station. And early in the program, we trained the commander and the pilot to be able to fly the space shuttle over and scoop a crew member up if they should become detached. But later on, we couldn't do that because the station and the shuttle were attached together, or if there was no shuttle there at all, then you had no opportunity to do that. So we designed and manufactured and tested this, what I would call a parachute. It's a way for a crew member to self-rescue themselves. There's a handle down here that you would pull, and it would present you a little actuator mechanism, which you would then power up, and it would stop any tumbling you were doing. And then you had a little hand controller that you could use to point yourself back around to the station, and then thrust towards it to save yourself so that you didn't go drifting off over the horizon and your oxygen and battery being depleted. You see me? Barely, huh? That starts to give you a little bit of an idea of the scale of the hardware we worked with. This is a space shuttle Atlantis. 5 of my 7 flights were on Atlantis, and that's me. I called this picture the spacewalker in his office. And I really did feel totally at home out there. I really felt like God designed me to do what I got to do, and I feel very blessed that I had that opportunity. Well, I also got an opportunity to try out the Russian spacesuit. And here I am over at Star City getting into their spacesuit. Notice that a little bit different entry here. There's a back door. And this is where all of their backpack things are, their batteries and water and air and everything else. And there's just a pad here that covers it. You open up that pad and you have access to do the maintenance and everything else. And then you get in there, and then you can pull a device that closes and locks the door so that you're inside the suit. And it's a pretty handy system. It has cinch straps that you can let in or let out, pull in or let out to size the arms and legs to fit a fairly wide range of crew members. But I got a chance to try it out, as you see here, and afterwards the suit designers came and asked me what I thought and how it compared to our suit, and I told them I didn't like it. Of course, the engineers weren't very happy, but the cosmonauts are going, yes, we've been telling them. So there were pros to the suit, but overall it wasn't as flexible and easy to work in. And in following years and subsequent to those discussions, they did start to add some of the things that I told them were deficient, and the cosmonauts appreciate that, I think. But what I'm also getting in to do is to test out their little rocket backpack, their little MMU or their rocket backpack that they had. They call it a space bicycle. This is me along with Amy's mentor, Joe Cosmo, over here. What was this suit, Amy?
Zero pre-breathe suit.
Zero pre-breathe suit. And here I am testing it all out. You can see I kind of look like a gladiator getting ready to go off to commit something or something. Anyway, but this was a suit that I got into and out of multiple times that day. And the next day, the underarms and my arms were just bruised. I mean, they were just red and purple because it was just, you're rubbing across a sharp edge to get in and out of it. So, things we do for suit engineers. Now, Amy will talk about this some more in a little bit. And a little advertising, if you don't mind. This is my autobiography called Spacewalker. If you come Monday night, Karen, my wife, will be here as the money person, and we'll be selling books, and I'll be autographing them if you like. You can also get them through Barnes & Noble and other places, as well as through Amazon. It's into its 4th printing, and people have really enjoyed it. And the second book is my children's version called Becoming a Spacewalker. This is a 4th grade reading level. Really, both of my books are really looking out to young people and encouraging them to figure out what they want to do with their lives, how they can use their God-given talents to support themselves and their families, and also do something that's great for the world, and encouraging them to set goals for themselves and to study hard and to work hard and to not give up too easily, which I think young people really need to hear these days in the pursuit of their goals. So I'm going to close now, but look forward to your questions. And again, Monday night, we'll look forward, the mayor will be here, as well as Bill MacArthur, and we'll be looking forward to answering your questions. Thanks a lot.
Well, I'm really glad to be here tonight because, one, I always love to talk about spacesuits. I do it all day long, but I never get tired of doing it. And two, I had late audio books, so now they're not any later than they already were, so that was great. That worked out real well. So Larry worked on suits that we're celebrating this week, and as the Apollo anniversaries will continue to come up. And then Dad got to work on the space shuttle program primarily and into the space station program. Well, my job has primarily been in research and development. So I am the lead of the Advanced Spacesuit Lab at the Johnson Space Center, and my job is always to think past now. So I'm always trying to solve the problems that are going to come up when we try to do the next mission, going back to the moon and on to Mars. In fact, I usually think about Mars because if you can solve the Mars problems, you can probably do the moon problems not too bad. So I'm going to show you some of my toys that I get to play with, and that's one of the reasons I'm a spacesuit engineer, because it's lots of fun. So we have some pressure garments. So a spacesuit or an EMU is made up of that, like they've been talking about, the pressure garment and the backpack. Those backpack people are boring. So I do the fun part, I do the pressure garment part, and fortunately we've had several different kinds of suits that we've gotten to work with over time, and really my job is to understand different designs, different ways of building pieces, different ways of putting them together, and that way I have the information about when you tell me I need to do mission X, I can tell you what suit you need to build. That's my job, is to be ready with that information to tell folks what tool they need for the job they want to do. Okay, so I get to play with different suits because again, that's how you figure out what those good and bad parts of each joint and configuration is. And then I do a lot of spacesuit testing. That's a lot of fun. Okay, so the spacesuit that I've worked with the most is the Mark III. That Mark III came to the lab in 1989. I did not come to the lab in 1989. I came to the lab just a few years after that, probably about 1992. But we've been working with that suit and then several others since that time. And so we've got, with some of our more mature walking planetary pressure garments, about 30 years of experience. So if you weren't aware that NASA's been working on spacesuits to go walk on a planet, we have been for quite a while, my entire career, plus. And so, okay, I did these really fast during a meeting, so I didn't get a chance to look at them again. Eileen and I were in the same meeting, and I was writing slides. Yep. So, what we're trying to do is make sure that anything that we work on, we can also then take pieces of that and do a mission in microgravity, but also extend it to planetary surface work, which I've basically said. And a lot of those challenges have to do with how long you're going to use a suit. You know that you can expect your car to do its job pretty darn well for the first 5, 6, 7 years. Okay? Depending on make and model, maybe it's pretty good out to 10 years. But then things get a little shaky. Okay? Well, we've been doing spacewalks for, well, most suits only have to do about 25 EVAs or less. That's what they're certified to. We're planning to take our suits and do 150 EVAs, 200 EVAs. So we're pushing the experience that we've had with how long we can make our suits last. So the durability is a big aspect, and then the durability in that dust environment also makes that a challenge a little bit further. Now it's an engineering challenge and we can solve it, but it does make a challenge. So here's some of those spacesuits so we can talk about a little bit. And that suit that you saw me with in Dad's presentation, and then he did some work in the suit as well. That's the Mark III. And you can see in these suits, they all have mobile walking lower torsos, and then they have mobile upper torsos as well. So unlike the shuttle station EMU that you won't get around with using your hands, and you have those boots with those funny little clips on the heel, these have real boots to go walking over rough terrain, and we have the ability to walk and then do good work with our upper torso as well. And we've been progressing these suits until now. Z2 went into Z25, which is going into the suit that we're going to fly in the space station and take back to the moon for the first time. That's the plan. Okay, so there's been a maturation from here on up. So we've done I've done hundreds of hours of spacesuit tests. That's one of the things that we tell people, is that you cannot be a good spacesuit designer unless you spend a lot of time watching spacesuits move, and you get into them. And so I've been in more spacesuits than most crew members have, just because we have a lot of different weird configurations that nobody else spends a lot of time in, but people like me. So we've done a lot of that. And then what you learn is, like I said, what's good and bad about each component. You can never actually match human body performance, because we are incredible systems. So just your hand alone, like Dad talked about with the glove, to try to provide that in an overshell that you're going to put on the human body is you can get good, but you can never get the same. And so I try to understand when you design it this way or design it that way, which way is going to be the better for what kind of job you have to do. Because I can design a shoulder that can do this, or I can design a shoulder that can do this. And I can optimize either one, right? But if I try to do both of them, I may have to give a little bit, so neither one of them is just perfect, but you can do both. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the kinds of tests we do, because that's the fun part, is taking the spacesuits out and doing things with them and watching them move. So planetary gravity, translation, and mobility tasks. Like Dad showed you, vomit comet. You got to get these suits out into places where you're going to act like you're doing things in the environment they're going to be in. Planetary gravity, 1/6 G on the moon, 1/6 of Earth's gravity, and on Mars it's 1/3 of Earth's gravity. Now, when you watch the Apollo videos you're going to be seeing as the anniversary's coming on, you're going to see those moonwalkers kind of moving funny, right? They do that kind of lope thing, they kind of gallop. Well, part of that is the spacesuit didn't have as much mobility as you'd like it to have, and we're improving that with these walking mobile torsos. But part of it's just 1/6 gravity is weird. And so you got to kind of understand that gravity that you're designing for and how to design a suit to move in that gravity specifically. And then 1/3 gravity is much more like Earth's gravity. You just feel like Superman, so it's fun. And then desert rats. Desert rats is a research and technology studies, okay? But not small rodents. Research and technology studies. So again, you're trying to take those suits out and do the things you're going to do in those suits. So we would go out to the desert near Flagstaff, Arizona, where the Apollo crew members actually trained to do a lot of their spacewalks and ride on the lunar rover. And we did what you're going to do when you go back to a planetary surface, a lot of which is science, a lot of which is geology. So we had geologists in our suits, and we asked them to, hey, do your geology thing. And then you let them traipse along and pick up rocks and hammer in rocks and dig rocks and do things with rocks. And then you saw how your suit let them do that, or how your suit didn't let them do that, and you got their feedback so you could design your suit better, design tools better, and build better hardware. Long duration distance translation. Okay, so yes, I made a mobile walking lower torso. Just how far can you go in that? And one example is, there's a practical application, it's not just a test of endurance. If you take a rover out, and then your rover breaks down at the end of your traverse, how do you get back? Well, guess what? it's beats. So you're going to walk your way back. So how far can you walk? How much metabolic rate do you use when you're walking? How much is that going to stress the portable life support system, but also how is your mobility system going to perform for those folks? Because you can, I wore a suit today that I don't wear very often because it's a little tighter than I'd like it to be. But I can do it for a little while. I don't have that suit on now, okay? Because it's not as comfortable as I'd like. So you can do something uncomfortable for a little while, but if it starts to get uncomfortable, you don't want to do it anymore, okay? So I need to make sure that I can make the suit comfortable enough, and I'm not talking comfy couch kind of comfy. I'm talking this isn't going to hurt you so you can still continue to be productive kind of comfortable. And so as you do that 10-kilometer walk back, okay, so that's about 7-mile walk, is my suit going to be comfortable enough to allow you to do that 7-mile walk, okay, and save yourself, basically. And then we also work with the portable life support system. That's what that is. The big backpack, the giant thing going back, that I give them a hard time about all the time because it's huge. It makes my pretty suit look blocky and awful. But sometimes you do need them to attach to the pretty pressure garment so they can keep you alive, and you need to understand how those two pieces work together as a system. And we get to test with them to see how that's going and what changes we need to make. And then, like Dad talked about, we also do runs in the NBL. I'm going to specifically talk about the Z2 and we put the Z2 in the NBL. Okay, so this may be hard to tell, but when you're on the plane, you know it. That's 1/6 gravity. And you can see my subject here running along on some simulated rocks on the surface. And we're trying to understand, how the suit and human move together as a system in that gravity on that surface. Okay? And you do all kinds of different things. We did some tests looking at the Mark III, the shuttle suit, and the Apollo suit together, just to compare and contrast their performance. Then another time we built a couple new prototype suits, the D suit and I suit, and we tested that with the Mark III as well, again to compare and contrast. And we've flown both those Moon and Mars gravities. And a lot of times we use a simulated rock surface because you're not going to walk on a nice smooth padded floor when you're on a planet. And we do things like, very functional tasks: walking, running, loping, kneeling, and recovering from a fall. Now, why do you need to run on a planet? Are you running away from the aliens? No. The reason we use running as a functional task, because we don't encourage running in a spacesuit, is that it gives you a very clear idea about how much center of gravity control you have in your suit. So that's a good measure for how much mobility you have in the suit and how well you're able to control your mass. Okay, and then, a lot of times what you're doing in testing environments is trying to understand what you can simulate of the space environment, and then you always have to account for what you're not doing so well in that test environment. Like the NBL, Dad said, you have the viscosity of the water. So, how do you know, other than experiencing an actual weightlessness on a spacewalk, how that compares to your training experience in the NBL? And so what feedback are you getting from the test that's really feedback about the simulated environment versus the actual performance of the hardware? And so until you get to do some of these tests in a partial gravity environment, you don't understand which parts are the simulation and which parts are the actual hardware impacts. Okay. Okay, and here's the Apollo suit with the Mark III. And you can see the kind of difference in mobility and stability here. We could have our subject in the Mark III get up and get down and stand up and get down and stand up and maybe get down and stand up again, while this little guy is still trying to get down and hoping not to fall over. And then usually kind of almost falling over when he tries to get back up. I'm not saying the Apollo suit was a bad suit. The Apollo suit did its mission, and that's the end level of success, right? But if we're trying to do more for longer, there are better tools to use. Okay.
Technology today, 50 years ago.
And then, just to show you, our suits are very mobile. And I have crazy subjects, but that's another story. It's Dom. Yeah.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, he's crazy. So here's Desert Rats, just to kind of show you what that looks like. We did runs with pressurized suits from 1998 to 2007, only missed 1 year in there. So we did a decade of those. That was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. And then here we are in Baker, California with the Waste Entry I suit, and this is out at Meteor Crater in Arizona with the Mark III. And here we're simulating putting up what was a part of the Apollo science package at the time. And you can see we have a little robot buddy over here who's trying to catch up to us because they move very, very slowly. And then we are not shy about asking our subjects to conquer the rough terrain, because if we don't push, and I learned this from Dad, if we don't push our hardware to do the most challenging things here and maybe break them, we won't know if we've really designed the suit to do its job on a planetary surface, because you don't want to find out if your suit isn't quite good enough when you're not here. Okay. And then here is taking a core sample and the rear entry I suit. Here is setting up a power source in the form of a flexible solar array on a planetary surface in the Mark III. And then here's the rear entry I suit in the Mark III in a little lunar buggy. In fact, this little guy, not this one. We actually did get to use the trainer lunar rover that they used during Apollo during some of our Desert Rats experiments, which was really, really cool. And we had to go put it back in the museum. Okay, so here is the Bliss in the vacuum chamber. And there's a long hose that attaches the Bliss to our subject here in the Mark III on a treadmill. And so our poor little subject had to walk around and create metabolic rate and carbon dioxide and humidity for the PLIS to deal with. And so the PLIS people view the little person in here as a meat servo and really not much else. And they want to deal with the little meat servo like it is just a knob they can turn on their test equipment. And they wanted to do, like Dad said, sitting here you're probably about 500 BTUs, you know, not working real hard. 3,000 BTUs, that's probably like really marathon runners. Like marathon runners was less than a 11-minute mile, right? Marathon runners. That's about a 3,000 BTU. They wanted one of my subjects to do that for 30 minutes. It was like crazy. So we have to watch those PLIS people. And then here is the video. So just so you can actually see a suit move, so I don't have to, you have to go to the bottom of the black screen. There you go. There's your little arrow on the left. Played earlier. So you don't have to believe me, I will show you. This is our lab, the Advanced Suit Lab. It's building 34 on site at Johnson Space Center. And this configuration is about 121 pounds. So I can wear this suit in its 140 pound configuration and move like that. So it's not like it's not like you're carrying a 140 pound or 120 pound backpack. It's a different, because it's all distributed weight, okay? And the suit's pressurized, so it does help kind of hold itself up a little bit, so that helps quite a bit. And we have shoulder straps and a waist belt that you can use inside the suit to also help distribute the weight, so it's not all just on your shoulders. So we are trying to think about these things to make sure that when you're using the suit, as the tool it needs to be, that it's very functional for you. And there was a metronome to try to keep the pace steady to get the data to be consistent here. So, folks can move a little more aggressively than our subjects are moving, but you can kind of see the different exercises we have the subjects do to exercise the different types of joint systems in the suit, so we can look at each one individually and try to understand, again, what's productive in that joint system and what's maybe not so productive in that joint system. Like we have the Mark III and the Z2. We tested and compared, and different hip systems. So one of the suits had better overall walking capability. One suit had a better side step. And so again, there's no bad suit, but different pieces of it might perform different functions, different tasks better than another. This is kind of a full body control motion. And this is upper body, so you're supposed to keep your feet still and just move your arms around. And so you can see you move your waist when you're doing this. So you can see the different kind of mobility systems in the suit. We have an ankle bearing. This is a 3-bearing hip, so there's a bearing. And then there's a bearing at the waist, and an ab joint, a flexion extension joint here at the waist. And then there's a side bearing and an upper arm bearing. When you want to make a pressurized, like a scuba tank, pressurized volume rotate, you need to start using bearings. And that's what drives the weight up a little bit more than like the Apollo suit might have been, because it was pretty much an all soft construction except for an upper arm bearing. Okay? And then Z2 and BL runs, so we got a new shiny toy and we had to go play with it. And we put it in the NBL. We had 2 configurations that we used. We put the EMU lower torso, because that's a microgravity lower torso, on our our planetary upper torso. That's a rear entry design, like Dad showed you with the Orlan. And then you can see, this is not what it looks like to get into this foot restraint when you're in an EMU lower torso. This is the mobile lower torso that goes with Z2. And this kind of flexibility is what we can provide even in a microgravity environment. So that was fun to show to folks. But we did a whole bunch of tests for us. This is a whole bunch of tests. 16 runs plus 2 test prep runs. And I told you we had the EMU lower torso as well as the Z2 lower torso. This is the Z2 lower torso here. We did a bunch of tasks that very well demonstrated how well the suit could perform on the International Space Station doing typical International Space Station EVA tasks. And we also looked at getting in and out of the airlock. One concern is that this suit, because of all the hardware and the angle of this hatch on the hut, the hard upper torso, ended up making this whole depth pretty deep, deeper than the EMU. And so we were pretty tight trying to squeeze through the three feet, the meter hole of the airlock. And so that's one of the lessons we learned out of this, is that to do space station EVAs, we needed to change that planetary geometry to accommodate for our ingress and egress of that microgravity airlock. Okay, and so we had a big helmet, and it was pretty deep. It kind of stuck out pretty far, so we needed to change that. This is the kind of feedback that we find when we put the suit in a test and get some feedback from the subjects. The airlock ingress egress, we did show improved upper body mobility. So let me talk about that. In the EMU, there's that big display and control module Dad showed you on the front. Well, that drives those shoulder bearings out. So one of the reasons we use a rear entry suit for our work, I'm going to go back here. Let me see, that one. You can see here there's this little bitty space in the middle, right? Because these shoulder bearings are way up toward your neck. Your shoulder mobility starts basically right at your neck. So if you have your suit out to here because you have this big display and control module in the front, then you're definitely not going to be able to do much more than here. Okay, and that's not your full range of motion, and that's not your body capability. So in trying to get your body capability into the suit, we move those side bearings very far in toward your neck. And so when you did that, you could go touch your opposite shoulder, when in the EMU, you're lucky if you can get here. So, improved upper body mobility. Yes, I have been doing something. And then, let's see. Yeah, and then we showed again that the mobile lower torso, surprise, surprise, causes you to have improved capability. And so you can see here, we're pretty tight getting through that airlock hole. So that's what this astronaut is doing, is coming into the airlock. And you can see there's not a lot of wiggle room, so we had to change that. And then here's our Z2 astronaut along with astronaut in the EMU. Okay, and so what we're working on now is something that looks a lot like this. And so we are going to go, instead of the 4 PSI, pounds per square inch of pressure suit, we're going to go to a suit that's more like an 8 pounds per square inch. That reduces the risk of decompression sickness. And so that allows you to get outside and do a spacewalk faster. But it also then makes it a little harder to work in the gloves, is really the end compromise that you're paying there. However, we do have a variable, the first time we've ever had a variable pressure oxygen regulator. So we can start at and design for an 8 pounds per square inch suit, but then we can take it down to 4 pounds per square inch pressure suit. So that will allow you to reduce the risk of getting the bins, going out for a spacewalk and get out the door faster, but then you can still get more functional as you spend time outside because you can bring the suit pressure down. So, and then we've got a design for these 3 major environments all at the same time, but really we focus here because if you can do this, you can usually get these 2 going. And then mobility, both upper torso and lower torso mobility. And we talked about some of those over here. Okay. So I think, okay, I'll skip those 2 slides, sorry. But this is the rear entry, so you can see that hatch open. So ours is a little different than the Russian suit. It's got a smaller hole, and one of the reasons we have a smaller hole is because the Russian hole comes way down here on your behind. And we want to give you waist mobility, so we have a waist bearing and a waist flexion extension joint here. And so we wanted to leave space for those things, so you have to make the hole smaller and move it up. Okay, and then here's what the shoulders look like on the inside. You can see there's not much space in between them. Here's our shoulder straps. And this is what it looks like somebody getting into the suit. So this is one of our suit technicians, Bill. And this is another suit technician, Nate. And Nate's helping Bill get into the suit. And so you have this little seat here, and you set yourself down and get your legs inside, and then you just kind of squish yourself in. And then you close the hatch. So it's really pretty easy. Okay? And then one last slide here. We've had an iteration since Z2 to really push toward maturation for our demonstration on the space station and the lunar suit, and that's Z25. And that mainly what we did with Z25 from Z2 is change that upper torso geometry to make it easier to get in and out of that hole in the airlock in ingress and egress task. And so we did 10 NBL runs with this suit, and we got some good feedback. And so we're doing our preliminary design review kickoff this week. And so this task gave us confidence going into that preliminary design review that we had a good suit that we want to go detailed design and then build and fly. Okay. And I think we're ready for questions now.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Matt, can we get the lights?
I think we have this. Try that.
Microphone.
I have 2 questions.
Just talk loud, Judith. Go ahead.
I have 2 questions. First, could you tell us a little about your background? Are you an engineer? Are you a physiologist? I got that information from the first speaker, but I'd really like to know.
Okay.
This is such a different job that you have. And the second question has to do with all the people that you work with. Do they all have the same build, the same body type, the same measurements? How do you work with a range if you're trying to design a suit?
Okay, so the first question is, what's my background? And so how did I get this weird job? So now there are some universities that have programs in spacesuits and spacesuit design. University of North Dakota, University of Colorado Boulder, University of Maryland, MIT. So there's some places out there where you can go and learn much more about spacesuits than used to. Back in the day, I just started working at NASA as a cooperative education student, so an intern. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do other than work at NASA. So I got to try different places out. I went out to White Sands Test Facility and blew things up, which was good fun. Oh my gosh, they pay you to blow things up. That's awesome. And burn things, they burn things like crazy out there. So that was interesting. I got to work in the crew office as a crew liaison person, and got to learn a lot about how to think about how an operator comes at hardware design. And I worked in mission control area, and I learned how to run the robotic arm and how to collect data and how to do flight control for the robotic arm on the shuttle. But one summer I thought, well, I'm a mechanical engineer. So I need to go figure out, because that's what NASA hires largely to do a lot of their work. We've got scientists, we've got accountants, we've got photographers, we've got nurses, we've got a lot of different things. So if you want to do just about anything, you can still find a job in the space program, right? We've got anthropometrists, we've got biologists, we've got chemists, we've got a bunch of different doctors, medical doctors. We've got a lot of different kinds of people, but a lot of us are mechanical engineers, aeronautical astronautical engineers, or electrical engineers, okay? Some more software, computer science type people, but still a lot of those. So I'm a mechanical engineer, and I thought, well, I really ought to go work in the engineering directorate and see what that's like. I wasn't super excited about it, so I thought, well, maybe, because I'm one of those weird engineers. I'm not somebody who likes to do this.
You're just weird.
I'm just weird. I don't like to do this kind of thing very often, but Dad always enjoyed doing spacewalking, and I thought I might like spacesuits, and so I worked with this gentleman named Joe Cosmo, who'd been working on spacesuits at that time for 35 years. He ended up retiring with 50 years, worked with Larry Bell, right? And so once I got there, and I got to understand what a pressure garment was, and understand that the key is that human suit interface, and then trying to understand how to design a garment. I was a gymnast growing up, so I'm very body aware, and it was fascinating to me to try to understand that challenge of how to design a garment. I also sewed in 4-H, right? How to design that garment that's soft goods, that's fabric largely, some bearings involved now too, that could move like a human. And I got to go to the lab, right, and touch my hardware. In mission control, you sit on the ground with your hardware 250 miles above you, and you might have seen your hardware once or twice, right? I get to go to the lab every day and touch my hardware. I like that. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am, and then I got to follow around after Joe and learn how to do the job on kind of an OJT, on the job training kind of pathway, and then Joe was going to retire, and so they wanted somebody to be there to be the next Joe, and that was me. Okay, and then the second question was, all the body types and shapes and sizes, and so there's a science, anthropometry is where they measure all the different dimensions of the body, and they can do studies and statistics on all those different dimensions of the body. I mean, if you want to know nose lengths, there's a book with a big survey about people's nose lengths, and you can know if you're a 50th percentile nose length, or if you're a 95th percentile nose length, or if you're a cute little 25% nose length. Okay, so yeah, it's a little crazy. And our requirement is that we meet first percentile female up to 99th percentile male from the 1989 Answer database, which is an Army anthropometry database. Okay, there's no such thing as a first percentile female. I have a 6th percentile biacromial breadth, which is that little knobby on your top of your shoulder here across. I've got a 6th percentile biacromial breadth from that database, and I've got, or have had, I might be better now, a greater than 100th percentile hip breadth. So people are very deceptive. I look, I hope, like a relatively average human being, okay? But
Glad you didn't say no.
I have 6th percentile to 100th percentile plus on me, okay? So, yeah, and that's not something you would actually just know, even me, who I do this every day, by looking at you, right? So people always talk about, what about short people? Well, it's short people isn't the problem. Short-armed starts to be a problem. Very narrow-chested starts to be a problem. But I can design a spacesuit for anybody. Can I design a fiscally responsible spacesuit system for everybody? And will you be optimally sized in any suit that I provide? Maybe not. But can you be productive and injury-free in your suit that I provide? Yes, you can. Yes, you should be. That's my job. So, yep. Yes, ma'am.
Almost lost my train of thought. First of all, do you reuse the spacesuits when the astronauts come back? And as one who likes to sew, what do you use to put these fabrics together? What kind of fabric or thread, or what do you use to put those together?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first and let you take that first question. So the question was, as a sewer, what kinds of things do you use to sew the spacesuit together? You'd like to think it's really exotic. It's not. Polyester thread, nylon threads. So there's a combination of different techniques in different areas of the suit. The place that it gets really interesting is this bladder, and again, that's not really necessarily sewing. This ends up being a either heat or radio frequency bonding that we use. This is a urethane coated nylon. The urethane's of kind of a plasticky type material, and so you can melt it and melt the two pieces together, basically. And so that's how you make this bladder material that holds the gas in the suit. Remember, you're making a balloon here, okay? Then on the restraint, it's a polyester material. Again, doesn't have to be exotic to do the job. Polyester, we now are using Spectra, so that's a little bit, more exotic, but still not out of the, what you can buy off the shelf. And it's really not the materials that make it so challenging. It's the dimensions that you're required to keep. So it's the tolerances that you're asked to sew. In the glove, for example, because it's small, it starts to get tricky. There may be 9 layers of fabric, and you have a zero, it's plus a 16th to a 0 tolerance that you're allowed to keep. So I don't know if you've ever tried to do that. My mom was pretty particular in my 4-H sewing, and I never even got close to that, and I still made it past her inspection. So, and these people, largely women, are very, very talented at what they do, and only the best sewers that I got to work with doing the Phase 6 glove got to sew on the gloves. because it is, that's the hard part. It's not the materials, it's the tolerances.
Okay, so for the shuttle and space station era, the space suits are reused quite frequently. And once they get to the point where they're worn enough that they don't want to allow them or trust them for use in space, we turn them into training hardware. And so basically every piece of hardware that I have ever worn has probably been totally worn out and discarded. So
No.
what?
Then it goes into PAO hardware.
Okay. But so on, and a little bit more on the sizing, on the space shuttle suits, we had multiple different sizing components. And so you could take and build your own suit based upon multiple different sizing components, which allowed you to fit a fairly wide population. And then there were some also adjustments that you could have at the ends that you could extend or shorten those a little bit as well. Probably one of the hardest things though was the gloves. The gloves again were something that were just very, very critical to design and get to fit individuals. I was told that I have a very weird hand, and yet the gloves that they built for me, a lot of people like to use them because they seem to fit them as well. So, who knows? Matt.
There's a gentleman in the back who wanted to know what kind of problems you might have had with dust during the Apollo program.
Okay.
Which problems
with dust during Apollo?
Well, actually, they kicked up a lot of dust when they were running. The worst problem we had was when John Young tried to do a somersault and landed on his back. And when the suit came back, we took it apart and it was almost like he'd call it grit. Talcum powder in the neck ring. He got it pretty well packed in there and bent the antenna on the backpack. But we'd always find quite a bit of dust in the cover layers, primarily on the thermal cover layers in the suit, and the pressure bladders and then the bearings, not too much because they were pretty well covered. It's a loose powder, and of course not much gravity, so it's just kind of settle like dust in your house, except when you jump in it. He admits that he didn't quite execute that, and he probably shouldn't have done it,
But he tried.
had a lot of fun with John. He's the one that broke a tang bag one time and then complained that our lithium hydroxide was stinging his eyes. And we got the suit back and it was orange jello in the suit, and the fan was plugged with orange jello. And I called John on the phone. I said, John, you know, it was that tang. No, he said, that happened later. I said, no, I saw the flight book. You scratched it out. He said, who else knows this?
But to talk about the dust a little bit more, that is probably one of the biggest concerns we have for suits going to the moon and or to Mars for long periods of time, where they're trying to design them to use them 150 times or so. You get that dust down into the bearings or the disconnects and anything else, and that stuff kind of smears and kind of almost glue the pieces together. So there's a lot of problems that need to be addressed.
Young man. What's your question?
Why did you want to be an inventor?
So the question was, why did I want to be an inventor? You know what? I don't know that I actually set out to be an inventor. But I think if you are an engineer, that's part of what you do. You create things. And so that ends up making you an inventor a lot of times. I like to think about what you need and then figure out how to make that thing a real thing. Does that make sense? Yep.
I have another question. How long does it take you to make this suit?
How long does it take you to make the suits? So the short answer is, like with a shuttle suit, it's got the different size pieces like arms and knees and boots. And so we rarely build, because they aren't customized, a suit at a time. Okay, so we build a pair of arms or we build a pair of gloves. And I know I can tell you that a pair of gloves takes about 5 months to make. Now, if you just sewed a pair of gloves, would it really take that long? No. Part of that is the process that we use to make sure that the hardware is built correctly and that it meets all of our quality requirements. So you build a little, you inspect a little. You build a little and you inspect a little. And that process is part of what takes it so much of the time.
How about back here?
There's another question from the back.
Sure.
She wanted to know, how do you keep the mask from fogging up?
Oh. Okay, that's a good question. How do you keep your helmet, the faceplate, from fogging up? Don't breathe. That normally works. Actually, we have had people that have had problems with that. Probably one of the best examples was Gene Cernan on his Gemini spacewalk, where he overexerted tremendously and totally fogged up his visor so that he could not see at all, and literally had to be blind man to kind of be led back into the spacecraft. But the humidity control that we have in the spacesuit is designed to help with that. We also have a soap compound that we put onto the inside of the helmet and smear it around and then buff it back off. So there's just a very, very thin coat of soap film on the inside of the helmet, which is there to help the moisture from condensing and making a mess.
Which is basically the same stuff that motorcyclists use on the inside of their visors, by the way.
Another question? Yes, sir.
Okay, so, you know, if you go to Walmart or somewhere and you buy clothes, you have a set of available type clothes, which, if you were going to design a suit that was one size fits all or one size fits most,
Impossible.
what would you, where would you actually do it if you were going to do something like that? Would it be 3 sizes fit most or what?
Oh, well, so with the system that, so the question, if everybody didn't hear it, is how many sizes would it do to be, you know, the fewest sizes fits most? So right now,
Actually, it says how do you build one suit that fits everybody?
well, that's not possible.
Yeah.
So not well. I mean, you can build it, but it won't be very mobile. So what we're doing right now with the suit that we're designing to fly on the space station and then go to the moon with is that it's going to have 2 upper torso sizes that allows for a change in position of the shoulder bearing. So you can bring the shoulder bearings in a 1/2 inch on each side, so it's an inch closer together, and get the smaller people in it, or you can let that shoulder bearing move to the outmost position, and it'll be for the medium people. And then the next size upper torso will have that same adjustment in the shoulder and fit the large and the extra large people. So that's right now how our plan is designed for the fits most people. You know, that anthropometric range that we talk about that we have to try to meet.
Does the body swell, or does it change sizes when they get into space?
Okay, interesting question. Does the body swell or change sizes once you get into space? Actually, I think that there is a definite transfer of some fluids in the body from the lower torso to the upper torso and to the face or the head. And if you've watched people on orbit, that first day or two they're on orbit, they have a puffy head and looks like they're coming down with a head cold or something. And that normally will go away after 2 or 3 days after the kidneys have done their work and got rid of what the body senses to be additional or too much fluid volume inside. I actually did some tests on orbit measuring the circumferences of my fingers at multiple different locations on both hands to see if that was a problem or not, and it was not for me, and most of the other people that have subsequently done that test also, I think, decided that that wasn't something that they saw. So overall, I think the body doesn't change shape that much. The one thing that most of us do notice is that we get a little bit taller, and that's probably because our spine is straightening out. And some people even say that there's maybe a little bit of additional distance between the vertebrae because you don't have the compressive forces of gravity. And some people, including myself, have had problems sleeping on orbit because of that straightening out of the spine, which causes some of the muscles to stretch and cause some discomfort.
How has that affected you once you come here?
When you come back down, that all goes away very quickly. Now, I'm going to give you a homework assignment for tonight. You're going to be taller when you get up in the morning than you are right now. Okay? So before you go to bed tonight, measure yourself. First thing when you get up in the morning, measure yourself again, and you will be a little bit taller. But it won't last very long. Yeah.
What's the hardest part to fit, people?
Yeah, that question was, what's the hardest part of a person to fit? And I would say it's the gloves, but we're starting to work on the planetary suits, so the boots are going to be the same kind of a problem. People's feet are as varied as people's hands, and you're going to have to be walking around in basically a hiking boot, but the hiking boot is on a pressurized spacesuit, which makes that even more fun. And so that's, I think, going to be a challenging problem that we haven't spent much time thinking about yet, that we need to get smart on really fast.
It seems as though it takes a second person to assist you in getting in and out of the suits. Has there been any thought on designs so that a person is 100% independent as far as getting in and out of various suits?
Yeah, I think Amy's group has done exactly, the question was, did everybody hear the question okay? Okay. Okay, she said she observed that it took another person not in a spacesuit to help get the others into theirs. And that's true. I've put the whole thing together myself, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And it's maybe not the safest either, because you don't have direct visual sight on some of the things you're doing. So I think Amy's group has addressed that pretty well with the back entry of the suit. You basically can have the whole suit put together, and all you got to do is jump in and close the door. You don't agree with that? She doesn't agree with that.
Well, I tell you what, better than the old zippers you had.
Yeah.
Reach back and pull it down.
Yeah, the Gemini and Apollo suits, you had those multiple zippers, and you had bladders to stick in there and everything else. It was, you had to be a contortionist just to get into it and then not get the zippers.
And during space station, in the early phases when they only had 2 people on space station, one of the things that a colleague and I did was we got ourselves into EMUs, just the 2 of us. So we didn't have a third person helping. We made sure that we could help each other get dressed in case, to see if that was a possibility in case they needed to go do an EVA with just the 2 people on the space station. We are working on a self-donned off capability. When you add in the full door closure, like you would need, so you probably just don't want to go bump against a wall to get the door fully shut. And then you're going to have shoulder straps, or you're going to have a waist belt. And so those things, we need to figure out how that's going to happen. The Orlan suit, the Russian spacewalking suit, has a self-closing door, not self-closing door, but a mechanism to help you close the door yourself, right? And so you pull on a cable, and then there's a cam mechanism that you throw to help get that door shut. So it's something that's possible to be done. We just haven't actually done that design yet.
Have you already started working on the Mars mission suit?
Have we already started working on the Mars mission suit? So I'm going to stand up because I feel very short sitting down. My job is to do that advanced technology development. And so the way I've done that without a mission to drive me to tell me what my requirements are is to kind of look at all the different missions you might want to do, and then look at the kind of the hardest requirement in each area, like anthropometry and gravity and thermal and dust compatibility and just durability, and look at those things and try to say, okay, what are my ranges that I need to be able to meet for each of those requirements, and design to those. So I mean, we've looked at moons of Mars, we've looked at asteroid belts, we've looked at long duration polar lunar mission, we've looked at all kinds of different things, and decided what requirements we thought were the requirements that we needed to design to, and we've been designing to those. Now, South Pole craters on the moon is a very, very cold place to go. And so we looked at that and we said, well, we won't send people into those craters, and we threw that requirement out. Well, now that's one of the places we think we want to go now, or we're being told we're going to go now. So we've got some work to do to catch up there. But that's kind of how you do it. If you don't know what somebody likes for dinner, you just kind of try to make a dinner that you think is going to be widely acceptable to people. And so I've been trying to build the spacesuits that are going to be widely acceptable to the missions that might be asked of me going forward. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm interested to know about the change from Larry's time, the Apollo suits, up to the current ones, regarding radiation protection? Because I know that's changed throughout time.
Yeah, of course, again, a little bit depends on where you're going. In low Earth orbit, there's a certain environment that we were sizing for. In fact, during simulations in Gemini one time, they simulated a major storm on the sun, and that causes a lot of extra radiation, and we were debating whether to even go EVA or not in that simulation, and that's what it was. We delayed the EVA until after the period of time that cloud went by because of the limited amount of micrometeoroid protection. There's dosimeters they wear that measures the amount of dose they get, because there is some radiation even in the spacecraft. So it's a constant monitoring, and where you're going, for instance, lunar versus Mars missions or interplanetary will create its own environment, and we'll have to address that. And I'm sure that they're doing that, Amy.
Basically, there is no radiation protection in the spacesuit. We monitor it, and the further you go away from the Earth, and once you get above the Van Allen radiation belt, now you're being exposed to deep space radiation, which is higher. And certainly going back to the moon or onto Mars is going to give us a much higher radiation doses. So it's certainly something that we have to figure out.
Monitor it all the time.
Yeah, there's a principle called ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. And so mainly our job, we've been talking about this, our job is to not make it any worse. So don't use materials that will give you even more radiation, because if radiation comes in and hits a big atom, then it'll spit out more secondary radiation. So you don't want to use materials that are going to cause a lot more problems that way. But this is where you've got competing requirements. Keep somebody safe and let them move around and do work. And in this case, if you're going to build a suit that lets them move around and do work at all, you cannot meet a radiation requirement that would be meaningful. So we're just going to track the dosage received, like Larry said, with a dosimeter. We're going to understand what dosage we're taking in during EVAs. We're going to try to make sure we minimize the number of EVAs you have to do, especially in deep space. And then we're also going to just try to track it and manage it. And that's just how that's going to work.
Way in the back.
I'm interested in the textiles. Are they all off the shelf, or are you looking at new research? And I know I'm going to Nomex 28 miles from the way back. Is there something still like that, with flammability concerns, EVA, and where are those things going?
Yeah. Okay, so she's asking about the textiles that we use in the spacesuit and all the different considerations that go into building a spacesuit. What materials can we use? So because you are in a 100% oxygen environment in the spacesuit, flammability is always an issue. And then you're also making sure that in that 100% oxygen environment, there's not a toxicity issue. Well, in an enclosed environment, there's not a toxicity issue, so you're not going to, the new car smell doesn't come in and kill you, right? That kind of thing. So looking at the materials in the spacesuit, there's this kind of, on the LCVG, the liquid cooling and ventilation garment, it's a spandexy material, so that's fairly off the shelfy. This urethane coated nylon, which we use for the bladder, that's a material that we use, but it's two fairly common materials that we put together, okay? But coating this and doing it right so that it stays airtight and is durable is not an unchallenging kind of thing. Then we have the layer here. What is I'm doing here? Oh, that's just the polyester. Sorry, it's nice and clean and white. I'm used to dirty clothes. So this is the polyester. That's a fairly common material. However, the specific weave we used to use changed, and it was no longer very good for the spacesuit application. So we had to look around for a replacement for it, and we went with a spectrum material, which is a little higher end kind of a polymer. And then this is that's the restraint and bladder of the suit. These two materials, and that's these materials here. Okay, and then when you look at the outer protective garment, the thermal micrometeoroid garment, then those materials are a neoprene coated nylon. Neoprene commonly encountered in mouse pads and scuba suits, right? Wetsuits. So again, two fairly common materials, and this is a ripstop, but putting them together is a kind of NASA thing to do. This is what's it look like?
Oil.
aluminum foil, right? Okay. It's called aluminized mylar. So there's a thin film material, and then you coat aluminum onto it. And a lot of times there's a scrim on there too. You can see there's a little cross hatching on there. That's the scrim. This is space blankets. That's this. Okay. So again, you can buy those off the shelf, but we have specific requirements we have to meet. So that's kind of where our challenge is. Our challenge is kind of in meeting our requirements that you have to meet, so we can protect the quality of the suit that we're building. This material, the outer material, the white material, and spacesuits are white for a reason, right? Thermal protection is the reason they're white. This is a very specific NASA material that was developed for the shuttle suit. It's called orthofabric. It's got 3 different materials in one, textile here. So it's oh gosh, I'm getting tired. The firefighter. Nomex? Not Nomex. No.
Beta cloth? Used to use it.
No, there's a Kevlar cross hatching. Okay? So there's Kevlar cross hatching, just in case one of the things you don't want to have happen to your suit is you don't want to get ripped, right? You don't want your spacesuit to rip. And so this cross hatching is the rip stop, and it's the Kevlar because Kevlar has very high tensile strength. Okay? And then it's got this nice Teflon not coating, it's woven in to the other layer, I can't remember right now. and so that is one of the ways to keep from getting ripped is to be slippery. Okay, so it's nice and slippery, Teflon, right? Non-stick pans. So that's this outer layer is very specific, and it's very relatively expensive to make. It's definitely not off the shelf. It's a NASA order. Yeah. So, and we're gonna have to do some of the same things looking at our dust protective materials going forward, and we're probably, to meet our very specific requirements, we're gonna probably have to buy some things that are a little exotic.
Do you get those in the United States, or do you have to go to other countries?
Yeah, so the question is, do we get them in the United States, or can we go to other countries? In general, for the United States Space Program, we buy USA, unless there's a, a lot of that's just intellectual property and those kinds of things. We try to keep some of that knowledge internal, and so every once in a while there's something that we might have to get from Canada or Germany, and so we can work those deals sometimes. But a lot of the textile industry anymore is in Japan and China. We cannot buy those, at least not China.
So, a question for Mr. Bell. Those original suits, they had so many zippers and whatnot.
Yeah, zippers bad.
Excuse me?
How do you make zippers airtight?
Oh, well, there was 2 zippers actually. The inner one was the pressure sealing zipper, and it had like 2 rubber lips on it. As you pull the zipper down, the lips would close, and then the pressure would hold the gas in. And then we had to have a restraint layer zipper behind that with stronger teeth that take the load, because what we call the hoop stress of a cylinder, when you compress it, tries to pull it apart. And the last thing you need to do with the zipper is have it constantly being trying to be pulled apart. So that was one of the objectives, to get rid of that. Originally the suit, like I say, was designed to get you out of a high altitude situation. It wasn't meant to go out and do work in, really. It was to pressurize if the cabin lost pressure, to get you down. Always an escape suit. That's why designing the EMU as such is important.
Yeah. So when I came on, Joe had worked with Larry, and I learned 2 things. Zippers are bad, cables are bad. There were cables in the shoulder and the waist of the Apollo suit, and those are 2 lessons that he learned from that program, that he said don't use zippers and don't use cables.
Speaking of that cable, one time we did an explosive decompression test on a suit because the Gemini was ejecting, so you could have a very explosive decompression. And we had a wooden dummy in a suit, and we did that, and the cable broke, and it broke his nose off as the helmet popped clear up over here. So that's one reason Joe said that, get rid of cables, because that was his suit going. Cut his nose.
Cable's bad. One more.
Yeah, and back.
Okay. And is there any kind of technology transfer between the spacesuits industry and then the emergency response? Because we build a suit here to keep things from getting inside, and we commonly call it a spacesuit because we're breathing and exhaling inside that. Is there any kind of technology transfer? And then I've got a question for Larry.
In fact, I'd like to address that one also. Go ahead.
Okay, so the question was, is there any kind of knowledge transfer between, technology transfer between, like, the folks who build hazmat suits and that kind of thing, and spacesuits? And so we try to look at diving equipment, deep sea dive suits, hazmat suits, government operations, DoD, different kinds of hardware they have. We try to look across industry and government and bring in any lessons learned that will help us. In some cases, there are some interesting things that we kind of try to share back and forth, NASA out as well as industry in. ILC Dover, who builds a lot of these components you see in front of you, also builds some of the hazmat suits. So, just that way we get some of that benefit. But a lot of the times, unfortunately, our situation is so unique that it really is hard to be able to get too many direct technology transfers. We might get a good idea that we can go work on, but rarely can we take, this piece of hardware and go put it here. Right?
In fact, I'd like to talk to this.
Yep.
Give you a few examples of the kind of transfers. Our original life support systems and even our pressure suit came from the Navy, because submarines have to clarify and purify their air and provide CO2 removal. So the technology transfer was key to our whole space program, to be honest with you. And I give you another example. A lot of things like the sea divers one time came in and they had lost a subject because he had not changed out his canister for CO2 and wanted to know what we did. Well, we have a little pin that pops out. When you insert the canister, the pin's in there, and when you take it out, it pops out, so you cannot put another one in until you reset it. And that was done on purpose in the life support pack to note you that you have not got a new canister there. And so there's a lot of transfer. We built a suit for Red Adair when he went over to Kuwait, for instance, to fight the fires, and used a life support system under a flame-proof suit, beta cloth and the like that we had. So there is a constant transfer, but it almost has to have a need, and then you respond with your knowledge. Hyperbaric chambers, we flew a guy back that had the bends on an oil rig one time, but building nothing but a tubular suit. Took it out there and pressurized him, brought him into the altitude chamber, literally in NASA, and brought him down with a doctor in there with him. So when the need appears, then the technology, I think, most generally gets transferred based on somebody identifying a need that we happen to have a solution to. Heart transplants, the first biomedical instrumentation that they wore 24 hours a day came from the spacesuit. The guy that put the heart transplant in, the guy from Africa called and wanted to know if we had something. First time he'd ever seen it. EKG, he could monitor 24 hours a day. So there's a lot of that goes on, and I think, in my own opinion, need identified transfer of technology.
And Larry, just early on in your spare time, what did you do in your garage doing all of that?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Somebody, they talk about being Friendswood residents. I lived here 43 years until my wife passed away, my first wife. I moved to a retirement center with it, and all I've got is a wood shop. So coming Monday, I'm going to be over here at the Friendswood Church working with creative arts, making kids bird houses and tool carriers. And but I had a lot of fun doing that too. So,
you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering about the lunar mission suits. Are they all up in space floating around in the command modules, or did we bring any back? Because I'm wondering about the chance of contamination. I know we put the astronauts in to in isolation, but you were talking about the dust in this suit. Well, he did the somersault on the moon, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So that dust.
Okay, so the question is, the suits that went to the moon, the guys wore the suits on the moon, did they come back, or are they still up there floating around somewhere? The suits came back. The backpacks, the life support systems that the two crew members wore on the surface of the moon were left on the moon. And almost all of the ascent stages, the ones they flew back off the surface of the moon, were ultimately crashed back into the surface of the moon. So all that hardware was destroyed. I think there was one, maybe that did not.
Stage stayed there.
Yeah, descent stage stayed there, obviously, but the ascent stage, I think almost all of them were crashed back into the moon, because we had seismometers that we had installed on the moon that we wanted to hit the moon with something and give it like a hammer pulse to see those seismometer readings and give us some information about the interior makeup of the moon.
That's why they were crashed into the moon,
Yeah.
or to keep somebody else from finding them.
No. Now, they would have to go a long ways to get them otherwise, and I don't think there's anybody ready to do that.
It was interesting, why we put them in isolation when we got back, there was a lot of concern about people bringing back germs, or was there something on the moon that would come back and kill everybody on Earth, so there was a whole lot of concern, and there had been unmanned missions went up ahead. Interestingly enough, the only thing we found out, there was a camera had been up there for some period of time, brought it back, and the bacteria that was in it was from the Earth when it went up. So we found we were taking things up, but we weren't bringing anything back unique from the moon, and we quit doing the isolations after a certain number. Yeah.
So you don't do the isolations
No,
anymore?
but that was done for that very reason that you're talking about.
But going forward, looking at Mars, we are still talking about planetary protection, both taking bugs to Mars and potentially affecting anything that might be there, as well as bringing bugs back to Earth.
So I guess you've inspected some of these suits to see where
Yeah,
there were
they're in the
failures,
Smithsonian, and yep, we've gone to they call it the suit morgue, and it's really a fascinating place, and so you can go see. I mean, I've touched Neil Armstrong's suit because we were there at the
Suits went into
Smithsonian.
isolation too. They were in there too.
What modifications to the suits do you have to do space versus water testing?
Okay, the question was, what modifications did we have to do to the suits to be able to use them in the water as opposed to use them in a vacuum of space? Basically, the suits, we had almost no modifications that we had to do to them. It was a life support system on the outside of it. Okay, Amy's telling me that we had to add some lubricant to the suit joints so that the bearings wouldn't seize up in the water. But other than that, basically nothing done to the suits themselves.
So the water doesn't penetrate the suit surface?
No, it doesn't go through that bladder. It does get the outer stuff wet, but you dry that out and you're back to where you started. Yes, ma'am?
How much did everything cost?
How much does everything cost? Well, I was told that a spacesuit cost, help me out here, $1 million?
10.
10 million?
10 million was the amount we always used.
Yep.
Wow, don't tell them that.
The pressure garment's only one of that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a point to that, though. You can reuse these over and over. We used
Yeah.
to make a custom suit for every crewman. They weren't that expensive, but still very expensive. Here, you use that like a car. You run for quite a while.
$10 million.
Yeah. And like Larry's saying, there's a point to that. We've reused most of the plisses for over 25, several of them for over 30 years now. So we only bought, I don't know, low 20s maybe, and we only have 11 of them left, and we keep using them. So.
What about the bearing that you're talking about? What is it made out of, and how does it really work? You know?
Yeah, so what are the spacesuit bearings made out of? They're ball bearings, basically.
It's a ball bearing?
Yeah, it's a ball bearing. And the materials you can use are aluminum, stainless steel, or titanium. And so our new suit is going to use titanium because that's going to be the lower mass option. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
In relation, I guess, to how much the suit costs, regarding funding for the space program in general, how have y'all been affected as far as, I mean, they say with each president as far as funding with the space program has been affected positively and negatively, but...
And so the question is about the NASA budget and how that has been affected through various administrations. And really, fortunately for us, Congress and the American people have been fairly supportive. And so we haven't gotten big increases, but we also haven't gotten big cuts either. So we've been held pretty steady. And in fact, we've seen a little rise recently, just a little bit, but just a little bit. But still, that's in today's situation, it's a very happy thing to get a little rise instead of a big cut. So NASA's been pretty steady.
But NASA's budget is less than 0.5% of the federal budget. During the Apollo era, when we were really pushing to get to the moon, it was up over 10%.
Yeah. And what's the DoD?
Yeah.
How do you clean the spacesuits? come back. I mean, if somebody else has to wear it.
I took care of getting
So, being in a prototype suit, you know that somebody's just been in it not too long ago. We do use a couple different cleaners. A lot of it's just an isopropyl alcohol, and you just use the isopropyl alcohol and wipe that thing out. We do have a biocide that you can use. Personally, in my lab, we don't have that fancy stuff, so we just wipe out isopropyl alcohol and dry it out. We like put a fan on it and let the fan dry it out. So that really does a good job. I mean, when I get into the Mark III, it's been around for 30 years. It's not a major funk in there or anything. So, but we do have to pay attention to that for long duration missions. Making sure the suit stays clean and maintained is something that we're paying attention to, and which materials you select and the texture of those materials actually matters a lot about how clean your suit can stay. Yes, sir.
The cleaning on, say, space station, is that any different?
No, is it cleaning on the space station any different? Nope, same idea. You use the cleaners, kind of wipe the suit down and then dry it out before you put it away. Yeah, kind of like your tent when you go camping.
Do you have to answer to other private industry like SpaceX?
Do we answer to? Answer to is probably not the right word, but do we work with? Yeah, so, NASA's in partnership with some of these commercial partners, Boeing and SpaceX, Sierra Nevada's working on some things, and Bigelow has, and we've got various different projects with various different industry partners. And so a lot of times what we are for them is a consulting and kind of a high-level oversight. So if, for example, SpaceX, in my world, they wanted to understand more about the crew survival suits, the orange suits that they used to wear when they launched and landed in the space shuttle. That's a crew survival suit, so it's different than these, but it has a very specific job. And kind of like the suits that Larry was talking about at the beginning that evolved from, our spacesuits evolved from crew survival suits in the DoD, and then we kind of are looping back around to helping industry design their own crew survival suits. So one of my colleagues went to SpaceX and has talked with Boeing and Boeing's manufacturer and helped them understand why we do what we do and what situations they might need to think about in their design, and so kind of that consulting role. And then we've got that high level oversight where, hey, we're going to put NASA astronauts in these systems, and so we need to help make sure that it looks like it's going to do the job it needs to do. Yeah.
One or two more questions. Sir.
I've thought that about astronauts in general, originally they all seem to be Air Force jocks.
Test pilots.
And they've kind of seemed like these days there are not that many Air Force fighter pilots that are going to the space station.
Okay, so the question was, in the original programs, he feels like they were all Air Force pilots, and now that's changed. That is relatively correct. They weren't all Air Force. There was also Navy and Marines and others, but yeah. But yes, for Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo and Skylab, all the crew members were selected from the military, and almost without exception, they were all military test pilots. Okay? With the space shuttle era came, they decided they were going to hire in two different categories. The commander and the pilot, the ones that were hired to fly the vehicle, were still basically those same types of players. But the new category called mission specialists, like I was, were engineers, scientists, medical doctors, and other folks of that type, who were hired not to fly the vehicle, but to conduct the experiments, to do the spacewalks, to operate the robotic arm, and things like that. And so, yeah, that's the type of people that were hired in for the shuttle program. That's the type of people you still see going up, in many cases, to the station to stay up there for extended periods of time and conduct experiments and do all that type of work. One more. Who's got the really good one that they've been waiting for all night?
I know there's...
No, you can't be. No, you've already had your share. All right, who is it? Come on. Okay, what is it?
You want to do this. You want to go the fear component. Everybody thinks about it.
What's that got to do with spacesuits?
But how scary is that, and how do you deal with that in a spacesuit when you're scared of something and, you know, things may happen.
Okay, you got the spacesuit in there, so we'll talk about it. Okay, so the bottom line is, did everybody hear the question? The question is fear factor or being scared about doing things. Anybody that does flying into space or going out on spacewalks, if they're not a little bit apprehensive or nervous about it, they don't understand what's going on. Okay. But you can't let that be something that totally absorbs you so that you cannot function and do your job right. Okay? So the way you get around that is by becoming extremely familiar with your hardware and the tasks you're going to do and concentrating on those things. And you've already accepted the other part of the element of risk and things like that a long time ago. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got into the business in the first place.
Well, this is why a lot of the early guys were.
Yeah, and that's why, as Andy says, that the original crews that were hired for the earlier programs came from the military test pilot background, who had grown up in that and had learned to operate and be productive in that type of an environment. I mean, we don't get shot at, you know, so we're way ahead of them to start with, so it's all pretty good.
But the ride up is like what?
The ride up is not like anything else you've ever done before and never will, unless you go do the ride. The ride is an incredible ride, there's no doubt about it.
Jack Lossman told me it's like taking his old Ford pickup down the railroad ties at 60 miles an hour. I don't know if that's a good definition or not. It's pretty rough.
You're just hanging on and smiling. Hey, thank you so much for coming out. Thanks.